Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Nearly 3 years ago, I made a video entitled A Look at Anime Male Protagonists, open brackets, or Why Are Anime Male Characters So Weak, close brackets. In this video, I coined the term fantastic weak anime male, which refers to a specific type of male protagonist present in a lot of anime, and I used Belle Cranell from Season 1 of Is It Wrong to Try and Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon as a prime example of a fantastic weak anime male. And before I made this video, I made a previous video essay entitled Concerning Damsels in Distress, open brackets, an explanation of the convention, close brackets, where I asked, if the damsel in distress trope is so popular and widespread, why do action heroines exist, and why do they appeal to men? This was a relevant question, as Alita Battle Angel had been released that year, and many people liked her and the film. In my video, A Look at Anime Male Protagonists, I try to answer my own question, and I might as well play the audio wholesale from that video essay. Broadly speaking, men like two things: attractive women and action. Combine the two and you have something which men will want to watch. Now, Alita looks a bit creepy due to her eyes in the film, but an individual I was following on Twitter reshared tweets of art with her. It was all fan art, and Alita had been somewhat sexualized in those pictures, so some men, at least, find her physically appealing. As well, Gal Gadot, the actress who plays Wonder Woman, is attractive, and although I haven't watched Wonder Woman, I need to point out her outfit in that film. For someone who is supposed to be an action heroine, she is exposing a lot of her skin to the fire of combat. Funnily enough, I've read an argument somewhere which posited that the female warrior, or the badass chick, is not a woman's fantasy, but instead a man's fantasy. The arguer's idea was that men have an easier time relating to and feeling attraction towards a woman who has manly interests and is physically beautiful. I disagree almost wholeheartedly with this argument, and I say almost wholeheartedly because I think there may be a grain of truth in it. At the time, I thought these simple explanations did the job, and there was nothing further to be said on the subject. But as time has passed, I've come to the realization that there is more to this topic, and a lot more to unpack. Before we explore further, it is imperative to define what an action heroine is and how she differs from a heroine. I should also state that I'm going to discuss why action heroines appeal to men in this essay. I'm not going to discuss if or how they appeal to women. An action heroine is a woman and female hero in a film who has heroic virtues, courage, and skill at arms. This heroine knows how to fight, and does so throughout the narrative in which she is an agent. A heroine, on the other hand, is a woman and female hero in a film who is heroic and brave, but isn't a warrior. Her strength is not in violence, but in other qualities, and she moves the plot without violent action if she is the protagonist. Some examples will help illustrate. Evelyn in The Mummy Returns is a typical action heroine because she fights with bare knuckles, guns, and knives. Her heroism is displayed in her willingness to enter combat and aid her husband in rescuing their son. Gerda in the Hallmark film Snow Queen is an example of the typical heroine. Gerda doesn't fight, and violence is remarkably absent in the film. However, she still acts heroically. She sets out to find Kai on her own volition, knowing that the Snow Queen is dangerous, and a safe return journey cannot be guaranteed. Indeed, she is nearly killed by the Snow Queen in the film. Both Evelyn and Gerda can be accurately described as heroines, but only one of them is an action heroine. With our terms defined, we can continue with the essay. Part 1. Why do action heroines exist? Writing conveniences. When an action story is written with a female love interest, she is normally a damsel in distress or a heroine. Only occasionally is she a villainess. But what type of heroine she is often depends on the story's genre, plot events, and the writer's own beliefs and desires. Now let's discuss the convenience of using an action heroine. Here's the truth. If you are writing an action story with a male protagonist, and you want to include a female love interest, there are only two easy ways for your love interest to be included. A, as a damsel in distress, or B, as an action heroine. These aren't the only ways to work in a female love interest within the framework of an action story, but they are the simplest. Let's discuss each option briefly. The damsel in distress is a classic, and as I argue in my essay concerning damsels in distress, an explanation of the convention, It appeals to both men and women. However, the trope and the character have a weakness. The main one is that without intelligent writing, the female love interest can end up sitting in a tower, or the story's equivalent of a tower, for most of the story. This means she receives little character development or growth, and has few interactions with the hero, which means that any romance between the two can lack chemistry. It's hard to develop a character who spends most of her time waiting to be rescued. There are ways around this, of course, two of which are to have the damsel either accompany the hero on his journey or provide him assistance from afar before she gets captured and thrown into distress. Both work, but each have their issues. The problems with the first one can be examined by looking at Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and the love interest Willie Scott. She acts as a damsel in distress at various points in the film, and follows Dr. Jones on his journey from start to finish. Aside from kicking someone down a ladder, she does not take part in any violence. In terms of plot, she is expendable. You could write her out of the film without too much difficulty. And because Willie only accompanies Jones on his mission, and rarely provides any effective aid, many people don't like her as a character full stop. Even the child Short Round is a better ally to Indiana Jones than Willie, who is completely useless. Audiences do not tend to like secondary characters who are useless and need rescuing the entire time, regardless of their sex, age, etc. The bottom line is this: you can have your damsel accompany the protagonist without being an action heroine in your action story, but it is hard not to fall into the trap of creating an unlikable character who everyone sees as useless. It can be done though. For instance, Evelyn in The Mummy, unlike in The Mummy Returns, isn't an action heroine, but instead a damsel, who is part of the adventure, and nobody I know dislikes the character. The reason? Because she is an active agent in the adventure. She makes decisions, takes action to help the main hero Rick, and also plays a part in taking down the villain. Willie tags along in her film, but Evelyn doesn't. For the record, I believe removing Willie from the Temple of Doom would be a mistake. Not only because an Indiana Jones film needs a love interest, but also because the character provides much needed comedy relief. However, if Willie Scott didn't fill the role of comic relief in the film, she would be a completely unbearable presence in my view. We'll talk about Willie Scott again in part 2 of this video essay, but let's move on for now and discuss the second commonly adopted route. The second way has its strengths. The first is that the damsel won't be useless because she provides aid to the hero in some way, and this will help audience members like her. She doesn't need to accompany the hero on his journey and cramp his style, but can instead stay far away from the action until/when she is kidnapped. How she provides aid to the protagonist can vary from story to story and from genre to genre. For instance, in a science fiction story, she can be a scientist, an engineer, or a pilot, while in a fantasy, she might be an enchantress, a blacksmith, or a supplier. The sky is the limit. The major weakness with this method of incorporating a damsel in the story actually comes part and parcel with its greatest strength, keeping said damsel away from the action. Although keeping the damsel away from the action will help the writer avoid Willie Scott issues, it also means she'll have less time in the story and will be less involved in story events. In short, you could have the same problem as the traditional damsel. She may not be in distress for a large portion of the story, but for all intents and purposes, she'll be sitting in a tower alone for a good many scenes/chapters. Now we can discuss the convenience of the action heroine. For the writer, the action heroine addresses the problems already discussed. Unlike the damsel who is trapped in a high tower, or the damsel who accompanies the hero but doesn't fight, or the damsel who provides aid but does not accompany the hero, the action heroine can follow the hero on his journey and be useful in all the action scenes. What's more, if the writer so wishes, she can become a damsel in distress in the story. It's actually easy. Since the action heroine takes part in the hero's battles, it is the opposite of difficult to write a scene where the heroine gets isolated and captured by the villain's forces and used to bait the hero into attempting a suicidal rescue mission. The action heroine doesn't have to be out of the action or out of the plot for large periods of time, and the writer doesn't need to think hard about what she should be doing while she is with the hero. Instead, the action heroine can jump on the ride without any issues. A good demonstration of the action heroine's convenience can be found in the film Willow. Saoirse is the action heroine in this story. Although she does start out as a villainess, the heroes only meet her because she is in the action. In Willow, Saoirse is searching for the baby Elora, who is prophesied to kill her wicked mother. Because she rides across the land tracking Elora, she encounters Willow and Madmartigan with the child and captures them. When she is convinced to join the side of good by the romantic charms of Madmartigan, she still remains a part of the action, because she was established as an Amazon near the start of the tale, so it only makes sense that she'd join the heroes in their quest to topple her evil mother and queen, Bavmorda. I shouldn't have to explain why it would be difficult to work Sorsha and the romantic side plot with her and Madmartigan into the main plot if she wasn't an action heroine. If she were more like a traditional woman or princess, then she'd have as much screen time as Willow's wife, Kaya. Now, this isn't a criticism of Kaya, merely an observation. Kaya is a good character. She's a good wife and mother, and her job, skills, and calling are worthy, high, and respectable, especially as not every woman can be a good wife and/or mother. However, when one is crafting an action story which is aimed primarily at a male audience, it can be immensely hard to include such a female character without her merely being a tag-along character who doesn't help advance the plot or adventure. Kaya's role in the story is to give Willow a reason and motivation to return home. The reason she gives her ponytail to Willow in the film is not only to show her love for him, but also for the film to later remind the audience that Willow is far from home, and involved in events which only weeks before would have been beyond him. Part 2. Why do action heroines exist? The appeal to men. Supportive action heroines. As already proposed, without any controversy I might add, men like action stories with warriors and beautiful women, so if you combine the two you have a successful formula. It seems self-explanatory, but it will be instructive to do a deep dive and consider why action heroines appeal to men, even when common sense suggests that men should only find the womanliest women appealing in fiction. Now, of course, there are an abundance of womanly women in fiction aimed at men, but as I'm sure we're all aware, there are a number of stories aimed at men and boys which include action heroines, and such tales have always existed, so one cannot just shout egalitarianism or feminism, declare it an explanation, call it a day, and put the kettle on. In order to examine why action heroines appeal to men, we need to formalise what men want in women more generally. Here, I'm not talking about physical appearance, but instead a woman's character qualities and the other intangible, but very real, things she can provide a partner. What do men want in a partner? Even with the prior specification, the list could be quite long, but I put to you, ladies and gentlemen, that boiled down, men want their woman to adopt 3 roles in a relationship. These 3 roles are that of lover, companion, and helper. Lover is self-explanatory, but the companion and helper roles need to be expounded a bit. By companion, I mean someone who follows the man on his journey and doesn't abandon him. By helper, I mean someone who actively and passively assists said man on his journey and in his mission. Essentially, your average man wants an attractive woman who loves him, has his back, and helps him achieve his goals and to live his life. As an ancillary point, I would argue that women want their man to adopt the 3 roles of lover, companion, and leader. For the purposes of this essay, we are going to focus on the helper role and how it relates to a man's mission or missions as it addresses our topic of inquiry. In real life, a woman will signal she is on board with a man's mission by helping him. For instance, if the man in a relationship expresses a desire to settle down and start a family, and his woman shares this ambition, she'll help him when he considers taking proactive steps to achieve that objective. For instance, by encouraging him to pester his boss for that rise at work, or spitballing ideas about where he might want to look if he is searching for a new and better job to get the money for this aim. As can be gleaned, what form a lover's help might take is dependent on context. The loving girlfriend of a university student who is trying to get a qualification will try to help him study. The loving wife of an artist will help her husband by giving honest opinions about his work and being his muse. In the case of a zombie apocalypse, a woman will help her man store supplies and shoot zombies for the shared common goal of survival. In all 3 of these imagined cases, the man will not only come closer to achieving his goals, but will also feel loved and appreciated by his woman and will be more endeared to her as a result. A double whammy. Now, in fiction, this dynamic has to be interesting to elicit audience engagement. Out of the 3 scenarios I've described previously, which would be more likely to appeal to an audience of men? Which would make the better film? The one with the university student, the artist, or the zombie apocalypse? I'd suggest that most people would prefer to watch a film where a man and woman have to work together to survive the zombie apocalypse, even if everyone has seen it 100 times. You could write good stories with the other two concepts, but they won't be as popular or as entertaining. Men like action stories, and action heroines and femme fatales fit snugly into these narratives. In such stories, the action heroine often takes on a supportive role in the narrative and becomes a lover, companion, and helper, and by doing so, appeals to male audience members. A hypothetical story might help make my case. Imagine a post-apocalypse science fiction story set in the near future where our hero and heroine, and friends, are equipped with advanced weaponry and have to fight their way through a wasteland inhabited by man-eating zombies and bomb a chemical laboratory which is responsible for the zombie outbreak in the area. The mission is as simple as bomb the lab and go home. This is what would be called the lift pitch, or if you're an American, the elevator pitch. And we can already see how a romance might bloom between the two main characters. Let us think back to what I said earlier about what men want in a woman. They want a lover, a companion, and a helper. In this sci-fi zombie story, the heroine can be all these things to the hero. To be a lover, they simply have to start a romantic relationship. Since they are on the same mission, she is a companion, and because they have the same objective, she is also a helper who is assisting him in his goals. Now imagine this film were made. Would anyone be surprised if men enjoyed it? Of course not. It has everything a man could want. Action, adventure, violence committed in a good cause, an action hero for the male viewer to identify with or aspire to be, and a beautiful heroine who loves him, has his back, and helps him achieve his goals. The heroine does all these things by being an action heroine and supporting her man in the mission. In a sense, the film could be a metaphor of sorts, the mission and the zombies representing life and its struggles, and the two lovers, the action hero and the action heroine, being a married couple who are working together to make their way through life, or a particularly challenging aspect or period of it. Viewed this way, the supportive action heroine becomes a metaphor for the ideal wife for a man working his way through life. At this juncture, some may be wondering whether I have any evidence of the supportive action heroine in the wild, and, as a matter of fact, I have already covered two examples in part 1 of this essay. Sorcha from Willow and Evelyn from The Mummy Returns are both examples of supportive action heroines. Evelyn is the best example of the two, as she starts the film as Rick's wife, and so is already established as his lover and companion. When their son is kidnapped, Evelyn doesn't sit on the sidelines and wait for Rick to do the rescuing. She goes on the journey, assists with tracking the kidnappers, fights enemies, and saves her husband at the end of the film. Evelyn is more than just a lover and companion. She is a helper, and provides active aid to the hero Rick. And now we shall discuss Willie Scott again. Many do not like her, and I'd argue it's because she fails to execute the 3 roles of the ideal lover. Although Willie does act as a lover and companion, although somewhat grudgingly at first, she isn't a good helper. While she does occasionally help Dr. Jones throughout the story, her assistance is limited, especially when compared to Short Rounds. Even though Willie does provide good comic relief throughout the film and is, in my mind, a good character because of this, she doesn't signal that she would be an ideal partner in the way that Marion or Elsa do. Of course, Elsa was a lying spy, so she wasn't a good lover, companion, or helper. Only Marion was ever close to the ideal. Moving back to real life, we're not living in a post-apocalyptic world filled with zombies, and, even if we were, most men would not have the job of traversing the wastelands, killing zombies, and blowing up chemical laboratories. Neither are we in a world filled with evil witch queens, nor cursed mummies. Because of the present environment, most men aren't looking for a woman like the supportive action heroine described, and would instead prefer a more classically feminine woman who expresses her love and loyalty in different ways and helps him in a manner more appropriate to the world right now. If the zombie apocalypse does come around, however, the preferences of modern men might change. As an additional point, I'd posit that depending where a man is on his life journey and what he wants from life generally will influence his preferences. A younger man who isn't in the position to start a family, or just doesn't want to, may be more attracted to an adventurous woman who is exciting and will help him have fun. On the other hand, the same man, but older, and who wants to start a family, will find himself more attracted to a woman who is reliable and has qualities which are conducive to being a good mother. In summary, Men want women who are good lovers, companions, and helpers. And, while the fundamentals of these roles will be consistent across time and space, depending on the environment, what it means for a woman to be a good lover, companion, and helper will change. In the context of an action film, to be a good helper is to aid the hero in his battles. This can be done in ways which do not require the heroine to be violent or engage in the actual action, so to speak. But one way a fictional woman can assist the hero is to be an action heroine and fight alongside him. As already mentioned, this can be convenient for the writer. As well, the supportive action heroine signals that she is a good helper by assisting the action hero in his struggle, and since men find women who are good helpers attractive, the supportive action heroine appeals to male audience members. Part 3. Why do action heroines exist? The appeal to men. Protagonist action heroines. By this stage in the video, some may object that I have made a great omission. Your Imperial Majesty, the action heroines you have so far outlined only include heroines who support a male protagonist in his mission. Women such as Saoirse from Willow, Evelyn from The Mummy Returns, and Valera from Conan the Barbarian. What about action heroines who are the protagonists of their own stories, such as Lara Croft in the Tomb Raider films, Wonder Woman in the Wonder Woman films, or Xena the Warrior Princess? Men often like these protagonist action heroines just as much as the supportive action heroines you have described. What is your explanation? This is a good question, and, unfortunately, the explanation isn't as wholesome as the one which covers supportive action heroines. Supportive action heroines appeal to men because they fulfill the three ideals of a romantic partner: lover, companion, and helper. As well, the actresses who are often cast in these parts are physically attractive. The actresses who are cast to play protagonist action heroines are often as physically attractive, but their appeal is of a different nature. Protagonist action heroines don't exist in their stories to help or aid an action hero, but instead to pursue their own mission and adventure. If a male romantic interest appears, he will be the one who takes on the helper role in the relationship, rather than the leader one. Because protagonist action heroines have to lead in their stories, they typically embody more masculine qualities and take on more masculine attributes, even if their appearance remains feminine. When a protagonist action heroine is written with competence, she is either a femme fatale or a woman with a rugged edge, but when written poorly, she comes across as bitchy. But why would the protagonist action heroine appeal to men? If, as I said in the last part, men want women who make good lovers, companions, and helpers, why would protagonist action heroines appeal to them? Protagonist action heroines might well make good lovers and companions, but they cannot be helpers because they are leaders. If men want helpers, for what reason would they find women who are leaders appealing? The short answer is different men have different tastes, but the more elaborate answer is there is a large contingent of men in Western societies who, often through no fault of their own, have low levels of confidence which affect their taste. Many things can cause low levels of confidence in men. There are simple things, such as lack of experience in the world, age, etc. And then there are deeper things, such as not having a healthy male role model, growing up in a broken home, etc., which can cause all manner of problems. We shall consider the second set of low confidence causes. General low self-confidence has the tendency to affect an individual's entire range of pursuits. It is rare to meet someone who is unconfident generally, and see his personality change drastically to one of brimming confidence in one specific field, even if he spends a lot of time in that domain and is good within it. Men who have high levels of self-confidence are generally confident in all fields and pursuits, even if they are only competent in a few. Now, there are many things which make for a good leader in all domains and fields, but the one which concerns us is confidence and self-confidence. No one wants to follow someone who acts as if he doesn't belong in his position, or doesn't know what he is doing. Everyone prefers to follow individuals who are confident that they can execute their duties and responsibilities, whatever they might be. Confidence is huge when it comes to attraction. Man or woman, the more confident a person is, the more attractive he or she will be. Confident men are not only attractive, but they also have an advantage at acting as the leader in the relationship. They trust their own judgment and capabilities, and the idea of being the leader of the couple doesn't unduly disturb them. But the same is not true for a man who has low confidence or low self-esteem. Taking on the leadership role in a romantic relationship for said man is uncomfortable and scary. Furthermore, a woman who wants a man to lead her will be able to detect his low confidence and be turned off by it. making even the act of establishing a romantic relationship more difficult. Enter in the ideal of the protagonist action heroine, a woman who has no qualms about being a leader, and you can see why the appeal is automatic. If a man suffering from low confidence could date a protagonist action heroine, or a woman like a protagonist action heroine, he would be able to abdicate the leadership role and take on the helper role in the relationship. Now, are there relationships like this? Ones wherein the man takes on the helper role and the woman takes on the leader role? Yes, and some of them are even healthy relationships. But the vast majority of healthy relationships have a dynamic where the man is the leader and the woman is the helper. The majority of women do not like taking on the leadership role within the context of a romantic relationship. The problem with the man who finds protagonist action heroines appealing and chooses to indulge in this taste is that he wants something which is rarely found in the real world. Now, some might argue that I'm being too harsh, because what I've said about protagonist action heroines is also true of supportive action heroines to some extent. After all, how many supportive action heroines do you meet outside of fiction? But there is a big difference between pining for a protagonist action heroine and a supportive action heroine. Remember how I said earlier that the supportive action heroine can be a metaphor for the ideal wife to a man working through life, while the specifics, ability to fight and support her man in combat, are not often found outside of fiction. Women with qualities which would make them good lovers, companions, and helpers do exist, and in greater abundance than the real-life counterparts of protagonist action heroines. Another problem, and this is where things can get yucky, is a lot of men who have low confidence, and who are not confident or skilled at engaging romantically with members of the opposite sex, are the way they are because they didn't have a healthy male role model in their lives. Children are not dumb, but they are impressionable. Children get their first model for what marriage and lifelong romantic partnership should look like from observing their parents. If they observe a dynamic of a man and woman in love, then they naturally conclude that their relationships should function and look like this, and that this should be the goal. But if children are raised by a single parent, or the relationship between their parents is dysfunctional, then they don't have a model for romantic interaction with the opposite sex. For boys raised by single mothers, the only opposite sex relationship they understand and interact with is the mother-son relationship. The mother-son relationship is obviously not a romantic one, but the mother takes on the roles of leader and nurturer in this dynamic, and the son takes on the roles of helper and ward. Obviously, this dynamic is healthy, but the issue comes when the boy, turning into a man, extrapolates this dynamic to romantic relationships. Or put more bluntly, when the boy, now a man, believes that a romantic relationship with a woman should resemble the mother-son relationship, with the woman being a leader and nurturer, and the man being a helper and ward, problems arise. For people who believe what I am talking about isn't real, please explain the existence of mummy, not literal, GF memes. As mentioned before, there are a few women out there who do not mind taking on the role of leader, and do not mind their man taking on the role of helper in a romantic relationship. But no sane and well-adjusted woman wants to be a mother to her boyfriend or husband. The mother-son dynamic is neither appropriate nor good for romantic relationships. And this is related to the appeal of protagonist action heroines, because there is another role which mothers take on in the mother-son relationship, which protagonist action heroines also adopt, and that is the role of protector. Arguably, the protector role is actually a duty which comes part and parcel with the leadership role. Small children are principally protected from danger in the world by their mothers, since they are usually in close proximity. In Western countries, women often don't have to deal with serious threats to their children, but when they do, mother bear energy is often the result. The protagonist action heroine, by the nature of her role in the story, becomes the principal protector of other characters, and of the world which they inhabit. Since men raised by single mothers never see a man adopt the role of protector, and only have the mother-son relationship as a model of interaction with members of the opposite sex, they are liable to conclude that the woman should adopt the role of protector in the relationship, rather than the man, and, because protagonist action heroines adopt this role, they appeal to them. With the appeal of protagonist action heroines elucidated, we can conclude this section of the essay and move on to part 4, and discuss the tomboy question, as tomboys have seen increased popularity and discussion online. Part 4. Tomboys. Firstly, what is a tomboy? There is no agreed upon definition. But when someone says tomboy, the common image which pops into mind is a girl/woman who A. has short hair, B. has interests in and does typically masculine things, C. wears baggy clothes, more practical clothes, or even men's clothes, D. is more athletic and sporty than the average woman, E. doesn't act girly. I feel safe proposing that these are essential criteria which need to be mostly met for a woman or girl to be classified as a tomboy. If a woman only meets a few of these criteria, it becomes debatable as to whether she classifies as a tomboy. For instance, I've met women with short hair that didn't meet the rest of the criteria. As well, I've met women with stereotypically masculine hobbies and interests who I would be unable to describe as tomboys because they were still otherwise girly. I've also met women who are into sports and are athletic. Yet, when they left the domain of sports, they acted and dressed like every other woman, so it wouldn't be accurate to describe them as tomboys. Now, tomboys are not my type of bird, but the impression I've had while researching and ruminating on the topic is that guys who say they like tomboys tend to be looking for a woman who is characterized by meeting a plurality of the previously listed criteria, who look like this rather than this. There is also a subsection of men who say they are into tomboys, and what they mean really is that they have a preference, or fetish, for women with visible abdominal muscles. But I'd argue the interest in female abs and highly defined muscles is a recent development, and really isn't a defining feature of the tomboy. Maybe tomboys are more likely to try and achieve a shredded physique by working out and changing their diets, but I don't see it as important enough to deem it an essential criterion. I'd argue the same for women who take steroids to achieve this bulky and, quite frankly, disgusting amount of musculature. On the subject of criterion D, I think the desire for a more athletic woman can be linked to obesity levels across the Western world and isn't strictly a tomboy appreciator thing. The benefit of saying you want to date an athletic or sporty woman is you don't have to explicitly say you don't want to date a fat woman, and are so less likely to be accused of being a fatophobe in the modern age. I feel I should add that being athletic or sporty does not immediately make a woman a tomboy, but some men use the term tomboy as a shorthand for women who are into fitness. When tomboys appear in fiction, they are often either action heroines or heroines who are involved in typically masculine fields such as engineering or have masculine interests. A good modern example is Alita from the film Alita Battle Angel. Let's go through the checklist. Short hair. Check. Interests in typically masculine things? Check. She does skateboarding in the beginning of the film. Later on, she gets into motorball, and of course, she fights. Wears baggy clothes, more practical clothes, or men's clothes? This varies from scene to scene, so it could be judged either way. Let's just skip this one. Is more athletic and sporty than the average woman? Check. While she doesn't necessarily look more athletic than a girl or young woman her age, as a character she is definitely both of these things. Doesn't act girly? Check. Since we have established Alita as a tomboy, and since Alita Battle Angel was a popular film, among audiences, not critics, and people like the character, we should answer the why, and in so doing answer the question as to why tomboys appeal to a section of men in society. Now here is where I hear an objection. Your Imperial Majesty, you speak as if there is a difference between action heroines and tomboys, but is there really any functional difference between the two? Wouldn't it be accurate to say that not all tomboys are action heroines, but all action heroines are tomboys? This is a good question because the boundaries can be blurred at times. I think the best way to distinguish between a tomboy and an action heroine in a film is to ask the question, is this female character a woman with a gun/sword, or a woman who is into guns/swords? If we look at Saoirse from Willow, who is an Amazon, a female warrior, it is hard to detect any tomboy vibes from her. She behaves, looks, and holds herself like a woman, who just so happens to know how to fight and use a sword. Looking back at my proposed zombie story with its bare-bones supportive action heroine concept, she could be a tomboy, but she could easily not be a tomboy. It would depend on how the writer crafted the character. If we look at a protagonist action heroine like Xena in the Warrior Princess series, tomboy hardly feels like an apt description. On the other hand, if we examine Alita from Alita Battle Angel, tomboy vibes can be detected where there is none to be found in Saoirse and Xena. She is actually into skateboarding and motorballing. These aren't just things she does. It's all about characterization, personality, appearance, and just the general energy which the character exudes. Unfortunately, when it comes to identifying tomboys in the wilds of fictional media, it is often a case of, you know them when you see them. For this reason, I do not think that all action heroines are necessarily tomboys, and there is good reason to be aware of this fact. With this distinction in mind, we can ask why tomboys appeal to some male audience members, and why some men state that they are their type. What is the root of their appeal? My explanation includes approachability, ease of communication, and ease of bonding. In order for mutual attraction to bloom into a romantic relationship between a man and a woman, both parties need to talk to each other and bond over mutual interests, goals, ideas, values, etc. At the start, bonding will take place over the smaller, less important things, such as shared interests or shared experiences, which act as a gateway into conversations about deeper matters and allow both individuals a glance into each other's character. It is hard to deepen a relationship without starting at the shallow end first. Men and women are different in many ways. They have different interests, different experiences, and different ideas about the world. Therefore, an essential part of starting a potential relationship is to bridge the gap and engage over mutual interests. Here's the issue. Because men and women are different, bridging the gap takes skill, and can be daunting, especially for men. Boys and men know they have to try and engage women in conversation and make the first move, but it can be hard to know how. Men and boys often wonder how they are supposed to relate and engage in conversation with a woman or girl effectively, when said woman or girl does completely different things and has divergent interests. Here enters the ideal of the tomboy, a woman who shares the same interests, activities, and attitudes as a lot of guys. The tomboy is imagined as more approachable, easier to communicate with, easier to have fun with, and, finally, easier to romance. After all, the tomboy is unlikely to spend half as much time clothes shopping, and is less likely to try dragging you along on her shopping sprees, and even if she does insist on shopping with you, you'll be visiting fun stores to buy skateboards, computer games, or action miniatures for a Warhammer army. Or at least, that is the fantasy. Put this way, it's easier to understand why tomboys appeal to some boys and men, and it becomes easier again when we consider the statistics that I discussed in my video essay on sexual reductionism, which was something of a follow-up to my video on the waifu phenomenon. In this essay, I mentioned an article from the Washington Post which cited research and data from the General Social Survey in the United States. The data showed that 51% of American adults aged 18 to 34 don't have a steady partner, and this percentage has increased for other age groups as well. This shouldn't surprise anyone who spends too much time online, because it is easy to find TFW no GF memes on the internet, and anyone with eyes can see that the simp population, despite everyone's best efforts to cull the numbers, has ballooned to massive proportions. And need I mention the ubiquity of internet pornography? These developments are the consequences, although I know some would argue that they are the causes of a breakdown between the sexes. For some reason, and this video is getting too long to speculate on the reasons, men and women are finding it harder to form romantic relationships. Due to this, it isn't so surprising that we'd find men fantasizing about women with whom they could more easily form friendships, which could then potentially develop into romantic relationships. If we watch Alita Battle Angel and the romance between Alita and Hugo, the attraction is obvious from the start. But how do the pair get to know each other? How do they break the ice and bond with each other? By playing sports. Hugo invites Alita to play a soft form of motorball with his friends, and that's where it starts. There are only a few women where this type of invitation would work, because most women and girls are not interested in these hobbies or physical pursuits. While attempting to bond over something, when one party is completely disinterested, can work, it will never be as successful as bonding over something which both parties enjoy. In summary, fictional tomboys appeal to some men because they are women who can be more easily understood, approached, and communicated with than more girly women. The tomboy is a particularly appealing type for men who feel that they are clueless and struggle to bond and communicate with more girly women because they know they'd have an easier time attempting a relationship with a woman who shares their interests, hobbies, and attitudes. Conclusion. As stated at the beginning of the video, this essay has only considered the appeal of action heroines, and tomboys to male audience members and not female ones. This is partly for time, but it is also because I don't think action heroines appeal that much to women. If one takes a look at the media women willingly read and engage with, the female protagonist rarely is an action heroine. For instance, the majority of romance novels and films aimed at women do not feature action heroines. Let's wrap up the video by reviewing the points covered in this essay. If a writer is crafting an action story with a male lead and he wants a female love interest who isn't a damsel in distress, turning the heroine into an action heroine easily solves many writing problems. There are two types of action heroine which appeal to men: supportive and protagonist types. The appeal of supportive action heroines is arguably healthy, while the appeal of protagonist action heroines is decidedly unhealthy. The appeal of tomboys can be boiled down to the idea that tomboys are easier to romance and bond with than women who are more feminine and womanly. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. I've been publishing books over the last year. You can find selected readings of these stories on this YouTube channel, and you can buy them on Amazon. Since we were discussing heroines and action heroines in this video, a book of mine which contains heroic female characters is my novella, The Pub on the Other Side of the Forest. You can find all these books and stories via the links in the description. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all have an excellent day.